digit numbers. The reason that they're different is because it's in color, and if I printed it in color, you would not be able to see. So I ran it to accounting, got the numbers. The 2017 budget that was adopted was $3,130,476. So the total of that. And I did not include, in there you have the salaries and wages, but I did not break that down. In juvenile, I have numbers for you. It's just, okay, Barb, are they ready? I was just explaining mine. Okay, has everybody signed in that would like to comment? It's right up here. Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, Wednesday, October 25th, 1:35. We have an open record public meeting to take comment. There's been a proposal or kind of a presentation by Martin Hall to move our detention juvenile facilities from the Grant County over to Martin Hall. We have Scott Hutzel, who is a Lincoln County Commissioner. He also sits on the board of Martin Hall, one of the 9 counties that participates. I think there's 9 in the consortium. He is a representative on that, so if there's questions and we can't answer, hopefully Scott can answer.
I'll do the best I can.
Okay. And we have a room full of people. We have about an hour, so we would like to limit your public comments to 3 minutes. And if you just want to come to the mic, state your name, or if you can have questions, we will try to answer them. There's a budget out there. Like I said, the total was 3.1 million for the total. We are looking at this. We have not made up our decision. We heard that we made a decision. We have not made a decision. We are only exploring this. There would be a savings to the county. We anticipated kind of rough numbers in the budget this year. Capital improvements that they asked for was $333,000 for youth services. We granted $137,000 capital. Not all, but a lot of that went to the infrastructure, the structure there for the, I guess, the detainment, the housing of the youth. We've had a lot of public comment that we received. Just kind of that we have a packet we're compiling, and so we're just exploring. We're taking public comment. Anything else the commissioners would like to add? And the savings we anticipate, going from a number here, salaries would be $665,000 that we would save. It's not, the hardest part about this is that we are, it would be terminating some employees, and that's what has been extremely difficult. Like I said, we have not made our decision. Benefits would be $403,000 for these individuals. So it's a savings of over $1 million for the employees, but there would also be a cost, whether it was $180,000 or $200,000 or $200 a day versus $180 a day. I don't know what the exact amount is. Right now, we are spending about $133,000 per juvenile inmate. We have an average of 8 inmates there, or juveniles. And Martin Hall would be either $65,000 per juvenile per year, a year, or $73,000, depending if you do the $180 to $280. And if we went with Martin Hall, 8 people at Martin Hall at a $200 a day rate would be $584,000, which would be basically a savings of $484,000. I know there's other costs involved. There's probably other savings when you're looking at the food value and other things, but that's just, like I said, a very rough estimate. So I guess we'll open it to the public. Anybody, please state your name if you would like, and we can go from there.
I'm Jody Froebe. I'm with Greta Plumbing. Besides, which I'm sure everybody will touch on, how horrible this will be for the families, because they're not going to be able to drive the distance. A lot of people don't have cars that will make it. But what about also the businesses in the community? I mean, we've done business with Juvenile Hall for years, just like we do with the jail. And the grocery stores, everybody, the whole community is going to be losing out. we can't lose this. We need to go hand in hand with each other and not put our kids through this or the parents. I had a child that was in juvenile hall, and my brother was in this juvenile hall. Parents can't go back and forth. It's just it's too difficult, and our kids would lose out, and I'd rather pay more in taxes than doing this, because it's just not worth it. It's not worth for our community. It's just not worth it. Okay, thank you.
My name is Penny Quist. I have a few things. In your budget, have you calculated in the cost of travel to take the
Yes.
people up there?
It's in that $180 to $200, whatever that rate is. We do not transport like Ephrata PD, Royal City PD, they would bring the individual to Ephrata, they would be detained for a little bit, and then Martin Hall, that is part of the daily rate.
Okay, and so what happens then when it's like a truancy for 2 days? That rate is the same,
Yes.
and you will transport for the 2 days for a truancy?
Martin Hall would bring it back.
Okay, so mostly a concern for the families and for the breakdown here is the fact that when you have somebody in the juvenile system, the biggest reason that they're finding that they're there is there has been, and we can all agree, that there's been a breakdown in the family. So if there's a breakdown in the family and you find a child in the juvenile system, and then we transport them clear out of the county like that, we've now created another breakdown in the family. Because you're taking families that have a breakdown, and usually there's a socio-economical situation with that, and we've now created another issue with that social economical issue, and we've caused another breakdown in that family. We're now creating an expanse in that juvenile system, and we're causing another expanse of you're looking at trying to keep numbers and not have more of an expense for Grant County. You're gonna find these kids not rehabilitated. You're gonna find them in our big people jail. And we're gonna have more expenses because of that. That's an important thing to be correcting. We want to keep the families together, and we want to correct the fact that they're in our juvenile system. That's what we want to be correcting, and keeping them here as a family and working with the other programs that we have in our juvenile system is what we want them to be partaking in and using those other programs that are up there. The other issue I have is I personally had a juvenile that attacked one of my own children. So in a situation like that, what happens to my family when we have to go to court against that child? Are you putting an expense on me where I will have to travel out of here? Or are you having another expense where that child will have to be shipped back here for those court dates? That is gonna steamroll, and there are gonna be other expenses with that because there were multiple court dates for that.
And if I may address a couple of your questions. Court proceedings will still be held in Grant County as they are.
Exactly, and those children will have to be brought back.
Right, there's no expense that's included in the daily fee, as Commissioner Carter stated.
Okay, so I have one last concern. In Grant County, we had, and I don't think she's here, but Madeline Sanchez actually worked for your facility. She worked there as a college student. Do you still employ college students there?
I think there were some intern programs there at one time.
Well, she told me that that is a regular thing that takes place with your facility, that you hire college students, and her concern was this: none of the college students were trained for any de-escalation or interaction with your inmates, and that was a great concern. She also said that the conditions there and how they were treated were completely out of line. She said it was a horrible situation, and that she would not put any child in your facility. That is a great concern to me. She was an employee for you, and she is a Grant County, citizen. That concerns me. I don't want our children in a facility where there are not trained people to de-escalate situations. I don't want a child from our community in a situation where there are not trained people to take care of the situation there. That's not what I want happening.
Okay, I just need that, our 3 minutes is up, I've got Barb in there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Go ahead.
I wanted to know if they've considered the effect that it will have on... Oh, my name's Joe Good. I live in Lakeview, resident of Grant County. And have they looked at the effects that it will have on foster children that are in foster homes? And then the foster parents, especially sometimes they have 2 or 3 children in the same home. It would be really hard for them to go all the way there to see their foster children. Plus, what about the effect on the children having to make that travel back and forth all the time to court, especially if they all have to travel. I'm sure they have to travel in a group, and they probably have court date on one day, so they'd have to be traveling together as a group, I assume. What kind of effect is that going to have on them, the stress of having to come back and forth to court all the time as individuals?
Well, we can't determine that effect at this point, because we're not currently doing it, so that would come with time.
So do you have a psychologist or psychiatrist looked into the effects that it might have on the children?
No.
I think that would be a good idea.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ryan Leonard. Thank you, Commissioners, for allowing us to speak on this topic. I'm speaking,
please.
Ryan Leonard.
Okay, sorry, couldn't hear.
That's okay. I'm speaking today as a concerned citizen, and I want to say that I'm very worried that we're considering outsourcing our youth to a privately run facility to save a few dollars. At this proposal, I would consider a few areas. The family support, I think, has been already stated. Legal support, I worry about the extra cost for transporting legal representation to Martin Hall that's going to have to be absorbed somewhere, either from the county or the taxpayers. Educational support, currently there's a local connection to schools, and I worry that even if Martin Hall has this equal educational opportunity, that they lose that local connection. Counselors and other support, there's local support for probation, truancy, mental health, drugs and alcohol, and so forth here, that if they're in Martin Hall, I think establishing those connections once they're released is going to be even more difficult for our youth. It's my understanding that counties that use Martin Hall do so because they don't have local facilities to house their youth. We do. So are there other counties of our size and crime rate that use Martin Hall instead of using a local housing opportunity? What would happen to our local facility and staff? Also, would there have to still be staff here for intake and holding? A lot of police stations don't have space to hold people or have personnel, and if Martin Hall takes up to 4 hours to arrive, what's going to happen to those youth? Would they ever get transferred by law enforcement? That's then an additional cost and concern that our law enforcement would possibly be out of the area during their time. Is there a 24/7 transport? Is there a transport fee, which you've covered? What is their transport vehicle like? Is it a windowless van with shackled youth in the back for an hour and a half? I don't think that's the way that we want to treat our kids. What's the current facility going to be used for? We just spent money to do some repairs there to potentially leave it unused or not used for its intended purpose. Unfortunately, some of our youth make bad choices, but if they're housed in Martin Hall, what other possible connections are they making with youth outside of our counties? They lose the family support, so they may look to the other youth within the facility to build those connections and support. That could be possibly more poor decision making. I think it may also even strengthen gang ties within our area. This is of course supposition on my part, but I believe it's a logical consideration. Staff to youth ratio at Martin Hall. Recidivism rate differences between Grant County and Martin Hall. What about adult waiver cases? It's small in our county, but where are they going to be housed while they're going through an adult waiver process or an adult trial process? What about our employees? I'm not comfortable taking away that many jobs within our county. What about grant funding? Is there any grant funding that goes to detention currently that we would lose possibly by this switch? Lastly, how long is the contract with Martin Hall? Are there other counties like Spokane that want to get out of their contract? Why? Do we still have to pay if we don't have youth there? Are there always open beds? If we find that this is more cumbersome for law enforcement and prosecutors, I'm concerned that we may even then prosecute fewer cases. And that's a concern to me. So I don't want less accountability in our county because of poor decision making. So I am not in favor of this, as you can probably tell. I don't think it's a cost savings, and I'm really concerned about outsourcing our youth to another location.
Sorry, your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you.
I appreciate your speaking. You just fired a million questions.
Can I
Please,
give this to you?
yes, you may,
Okay.
because I would really like to do my best in answering your questions, all of us would.
Yes.
So I was hoping you didn't want to answer to everyone right now.
No, I don't. I just wanted to bring up some ideas for thought.
Thank you.
Tom, do you want to answer some of them real quick?
I can attempt to answer some of them. Wow, this is really loud. I guess you don't need those. One of them was the statement on small savings. I think we need to probably define what a small savings is, and each of us, that's a little bit different. Commissioner Carter did state what some of those savings would be, and there are additional savings as well. Would there still be staff for intake and holding transport? That's something we have to determine. Keep in mind, we're not saying we're going to do this. We're not proposing to do this. We're taking a look at it. We're trying to be accountable as your commissioners, accountable as employers, and take a look at what is probably the best for Grant County, and that's why you're here today. So we don't have the answers to all of these questions, but we can try to answer as many as we can. And as far as the questions that Ryan provided, we will get answers back to as many of these as we can, because we do take them serious, and we know there's some concerns, and we want to try to address those. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tom Wolfstone. I'm a local resident as well as being a part-time juvenile court public defender. I echo the thoughts expressed by the previous speakers, and they addressed many of my thoughts as well. I am concerned, and I hope the council will look into the question of the amount of oversight on conditions and programming at Martin Hall, and the question of whether or not Martin Hall is accredited by any state or national organizations. You should be aware of the fact that if it's not accredited, there's a risk that the programming will not meet state guidelines and will jeopardize state funding, and that's something you'll need to factor into your budget as well. One of the biggest concerns that I have is what the impact of this will be on the ability to provide effective assistance of counsel. Juveniles are not just small adults. They need time to reach decisions. They frequently need hand-holding to reach decisions. We need to spend extra time with them, going over the police report materials and the evidence in cases. Frequently, they don't read. Frequently, there are ADD and have attention problems, and it takes multiple meetings with the clients. In my experience, the clients who are in detention are definitely fitting into that category. We spend a lot of time with our clients, and if the kids are warehoused at Martin Hall, we're not going to be able to spend anywhere near as much time with our clients, which will make the county vulnerable to lawsuits for denying effective assistance of counsel, as well, of course, as the question of how we're going to get paid for going to Martin Hall. The court calendar, quite frankly, will bog down because kids won't be able to make decisions. We'll need to take time to try talking with them when they get transported, when we need to be actually handling cases in front of the judge. All of this is going to have a very adverse effect on our ability to provide effective assistance of counsel. And this county has gone through the difficulties on prior lawsuits over the question of effective assistance of counsel. None of us defenders want to see our name in the newspapers or in state Supreme Court decisions for over denying effective assistance of counsel. From our standpoint, it's a major, the idea is a major problem. I will go ahead and write out additional comments or flesh out these comments in writing and deliver them to the council. I recognize the 3-minute limit. I would ask the council if it knows why Spokane County terminated its relationship with Martin Hall. I understand that they're still paying several $100,000 a year for many years down the road and chose to back out of keeping their kids there. I think the council needs to look into that.
Okay, we're actually at our 3 minutes, and I can actually, Commissioner Hutzel, answer your question probably on Spokane.
Spokane County,
Yes.
Spokane County is still a consortium member. They have never backed out. They have their own facility, what they've used Martin Hall for over the years. In fact, when Martin Hall first came to fruition in 1995, they were having problems with overcrowding. So they used Martin Hall as their overflow, and have actually periodically, we have, when there's a conflict inside of detention, have Spokane County kids still come out to the facility, not very often, because they have 36 or 38 cells at their facility, so that's what, but Spokane County is a consortium member. They attend our meetings on a regular basis. They do pay their guaranteed bed day rate based on what was originally established for the operation of Martin Hall with the 9 consortium members. Spokane County was one of the big drivers in Martin Hall originally, not just the need from the other 8 outside counties, but and that was one. So the outside counties, for those of you who don't know who they are, Douglas County. So we transport juveniles from Wenatchee and Waterville. We have Ferry County, Stevens County, Ponderoy County, Lincoln County, Adams County, and then South Whitman County, clear down to Waukegan County. So we also transport juveniles from, and they have all been consortium members since 1995. So Martin Hall's been in existence, this is our 21 years since it opened the doors, so.
Can you address this concern on accreditation?
Yeah, as far as the accreditation piece, I would have to go back. I've never heard it stated that specifically. Accredited, does it pass? The administrator in Martin Hall, Palmquist, is for those in law enforcement understand what the Prison Rape Elimination Act is. He's a certified auditor for PREA. He can come and do your PREA audits. Does a lot of county, both juvenile and adult audits. He's been in the business he was a former federal prison warden for 30 years. He lives at Loon Lake now. WSU grad. Runs a pretty good, and the company, it's not a private facility. You gotta remember, the building is owned by the state of Washington. We lease it from the state of Washington. We have a 50-year lease with a 50-year option for $1 a year. That's how it started. That's how it was originally put together. We contract with a company called Community Corrections and Counseling Services, CCCS. They're based out of Butte, Montana, and they've been our operator there for 19 years now. Have operated the facility for that long, and they transport. They like I said, the transport piece has been, with the concerns about that, and I understand that. Don't get me wrong, but we transport juveniles from Clarkston. We transport from Othello. We transport them from Wenatchee every week, and have been for 20 years. So it's there has been. These concerns, I'm sure, came up 20 years ago on that, and it's been operational.
Okay.
Pretty much,
3 minutes
excuse
is
me.
up.
Sorry.
And they will, public defense, we have talked to Brett Hill, who's over our public defense. Yes, they will still get legal counsel. The attorneys will be paid mileage, reimbursed at the same rate they're currently reambushed. So they
Are
will
we
still.
gonna get paid for our time going there?
I would assume all attorneys, we can ask Brett, they're reimbursed for their time to and from.
It depends on their contract, I would say, whether they're on an hourly or a per case basis.
And then there's the question of whether they're gonna have the time to spend several hours for the round trip, plus meeting with the clients. Fitting that into their schedule.
Thank you.
One of the questions the speaker had was Martin Hall accredited? I'm not knowledgeable on accreditations in juvenile facilities. Maybe Garth or Warren could speak to that. Is there a state or national accreditation process for juvenile facilities?
Yes.
Is Grant County Juvenile Facility state or national accredited?
No.
Okay. There is, one of the comments Garth had made to the media was abiding by state standards for detention facilities. Martin Hall, after speaking with their staff, Martin Hall operates, because they are in the state of Washington, just because they're operated by a private firm, they do operate by they are held to the exact same standards as Grant County and all other youth detention facilities are.
I would argue with that.
Okay, but we're not here to argue, we're here to just provide information. Listen, comment, thank you.
I'm Skip Bennett. I pastor a church in Moses Lake, but I've had the privilege of visiting several juvenile detention facilities within the state. Simple comment. One of the joys of my visit is watching other parents and family members visit their children. They light up. I leave there feeling good because I've contributed a little bit to their rehabilitation process. I would hate to see these juveniles not have the privilege of having regular visitation from family and friends. It's critical to their future. It's not a dollar situation as much as it is critical mentally and emotionally reestablishing them in the community. And I would fully support them staying here where they belong.
My name's Linda Williams. And one of the
Then you can you speak up just a little bit?
I'm
We are on the
sorry.
record.
One of the things that I'm wondering is you've just redone this building. Now, say you decide to do this, what are you going to do with that building?
That's to be determined.
Well,
I mean,
we're still gonna have services up there. This is
What
just the
kind?
detention portion of it, the overnight stay of the juvenile. There's still a courtroom, there's still offices, you still have services that you're providing for treatment counselors, probation counselors. We still have a staff that will remain. This is just the detention portion.
Okay, now, one of the other things is, can we put this up to a vote on a ballot for the countywide,
I don't
for
believe
us
so.
parents to say yay or nay?
Is Jim in here? Jim was our civil attorney?
Jim. There
Yes,
is.
Jim. Is this something that would go for a,
You have to weed your way out of there.
because I don't know the answer to this question.
Hi, Jim Mitchell, Civil Deputy Prosecutor. You theoretically could put it up to an advisory vote if you wanted to, but other than that, it's solely
Council.
Advisory,
it's a
okay.
commissioner's decision.
Okay, thank you.
Are there going to be further discussions on this for the public to have input? Besides
I don't,
this
this is our
Find
first one that we've had, so
Okay.
this,
Because,
We haven't planned any more as of now.
okay, because I think we need to have more input and we need to have harder numbers for the public to see.
That's what we're in the process of doing.
Okay.
thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Middleton. I'm a resident here of Grant County. I won't belabor the point of that. I think everyone can agree that if you keep the stuff local, the kids local, it's a better product. So you're really looking at a financial situation. And you say you can save $500,000, which is a good sum of money, but that's only if you keep the beds at the 8 or 9 or 10. If you double, then that rate's doubling, and all of a sudden some of your cost savings are going away. And the county's growing. I mean, Moses Lake is growing, the county's growing. We're gonna get more people here. Hopefully not juvenile defendants, don't get me wrong.
Numbers have gone down,
I know,
statewide, nationwide.
yeah.
That's why we're even having the conversation, because of the efficiency. That's what we're interested in. You're right, if they doubled again 5 years from now, it's gonna be a different situation.
And then we have that, and that contract where you can't get out, you can get in, but you can't get out.
That's not the case. That's only if we join the consortium.
No, I understand, but if you join, then you can't get out. So that's just, from a legal standpoint, that's something that you'd want to look at, because you'd be burdening the future commissioners with this fact that we couldn't get out of this 10 years down the road. And maybe you wouldn't want to, but you wouldn't have an option to get out. If you do go forward with it, I don't know if you can put in a clause that says we can get out if we want whenever, but that would be something to look at. I guess the other thing, there's a local multiplier effect in monetary policy. You know, if you spend $2 million here, you're giving it to people that are living here, paying taxes here, buying stuff here. It will turn over and multiply. If you send $2 million, or however much you're going to save, I guess I was under the assumption that if it's 3.1 million and you're going to save 500,000, Are you looking at sending 2.6 million up to Spokane?
No, a lot of
No, I
those
know.
services will stay here.
And that's what I understand, but still, if you're gonna save so much money, but you're gonna cut, 25 jobs, those people spend money locally, it turns over a few times. It's kind of like the deal between if you can save $10 buying a truck from a local business for the police or a police car, but you can save $10 by buying it down in Arizona, but it's gonna cost you $10 more to buy it here, you're better off buying it here because the money will stay local. It does leak out, but there is a multiplier effect. So I guess it's an awful lot to look at giving up control. That's the main factor that I look at. Thanks.
I'd like to address your opening statement. One of the things you stated, if I understood it correctly, you talked about you pay one cost now on a certain amount of beds, and if that doubles, I would assume you were talking about Martin Hall, the use of Martin Hall.
Well, yes, I was talking about, I guess, both things. One is, yes, if the numbers go up and you start having more kids here, then, your numbers you're gonna spend more money out there. And at a certain point, you're gonna reach a tipping point where it's more expensive to send them to Martin Hall than it is to have it done here locally. The other thing is, and I don't know, because I guess you don't have the figures or know what's going on, but you don't know what's gonna happen, not that you don't know what's going on. But what about escalator clauses in the contracts? What about, everything inflates if, and you lose control. Right now, you have control. They're your employees. If there's a problem, you investigate, you have complete control. If you join up there, you're 1 in 10. And you don't get to call the shots. Thanks.
Do you want to talk about the consortium? You contract, Martin Hall contracts with others. You don't necessarily have to join the consortium to use Martin Hall.
Right, we have, an outside user group, which includes, since I've been there, Garfield County's an outside user as a specific county, but we have the Yakima tribe, the Spokane tribe, the Kalispell tribe, the Coeur d'Alene tribe. A lot of tribal kids have been back and forth, over the years. Used to be back in the day, there was a lot of INS ICE kids that were there back in the early 2000s after 9/11. There was so it's been a lot of different users. We've had a couple of different rates. Outside users a little different rate. We've back to the in and the out and the things like that. Those things take a unanimous vote of the consortium board. So you have to be a consortium member to have that piece. Whether or not, number one, if we were to consider another member to the consortium, it would take all 9 counties to approve that. So just some of the different things that were set up originally on the interlocal agreement that was established. And the reason that was established back in 1995 is there was a bond, $6 million bond to revamp the whole facility into a juvenile detention facility. And the reason the 50-year interlocal and how it was established was to make sure that the bond, Stevens County sold the bonds, that we were, all the entities inside there were obligated to pay their share of the bonds, of which last year the bond payment, the 20-year bond payments were done at the end of last year from all the consortium members. So that was one of the real tightness of the interlocal agreement, was one of the ways they were able to get that bond. You go out for I'm sure there are bonds, Grant County goes out for bonds. If you had to split that among 9 different entities, people that were fronting that money would want a pretty good assurance that was going to get paid. So that was kind of how that was originally set up.
One of the comments that was made earlier about cost savings, and I know Commissioner Carter and Commissioner Stevens have given us some figures in the $500 to $6,000 range. And I hope I-Fiber gets this absolutely correct, the words coming out of my mouth, just so there's no misunderstanding. Looking at the budget numbers, if Martin Hall in its entirety was shut down by Grant County, that means all employees, all services, everything. The county could save probably $2.3 million. That's not what we're looking at. And I don't want anybody to get the perception out there in the public that that is what we're looking at. And I've heard those rumblings, and we want to assure you, we're looking at all kinds of different things to be efficient both with operations and both with budget as well. So please make sure that you have the understanding that we're not looking, we understand that there are services that need to be provided to our youth in Grant County. We're simply exploring all options and ideas at this time.
Hi, Amber Reeves, detention monitor with Grant County Juvenile Detention Center for nearly a decade. A concern. The purpose of juvenile detention is intervention and rehabilitation. If we were to outsource and send our youth from our community to another facility several hours away, how are they intended to establish relationships with the resources that we provide within our community, such as Park or WISE, ART, to help them reestablish a new way of life and rehabilitate them? I know that there are resources up in Martin Hall, but those are several hours away. They wouldn't be establishing the relationships that we currently are allowing and encouraging now within our facility.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there are just treatments, opportunities over there in Martin Hall while they're there, and then they would continue once they're released, that they would pick up the services here in Grant County.
Hi, I'm Corey Stevens. I'm the juvenile detention manager at Chelan County Juvenile Court, Wenatchee. And the reason I came here, a couple reasons actually. First of all, I just wanted to echo some of the sentiments that were here today. I think there's costs considered other than financial costs. The issue of having youth housed 115 miles away one way at Medical Lake is a big issue to indigent families who are going to be faced with the prospect of incurring the cost and carving out the ability to make that trip to make certain that the visitation occurs. One issue that I've not heard voiced yet is relationships with local probation staff and therapy services, mental health, chemical dependency counselors, the WISE program, I heard that mentioned before. How is it feasible to formulate any kind of meaningful transition planning if you can't have a face-to-face appointment on a regular basis other than carving out some time during the court docket when the kid is back here on a short-term basis? I think there's definitely going to be some difficulty in doing that. The other thing that I'd like to say, I'm glad to hear that you have not made any firm decisions to move forward on this proposal, because I think there's other options. When I hear $180 to $200 a day, that's the potential rate that Martin Hall is offering. That's a big number. I think there's other facilities, other juvenile facilities, and don't get me wrong, I hope for the reasons that have been stated here today that you don't opt to outsource and to engage in a bed rental agreement elsewhere. But if you do, Chelan County, we're 50 miles away as opposed to 115 miles. My understanding, with whether you're a consortium member or not, my understanding is that when you enter into a contractual obligation with Martin Hall, you're essentially renting bed space, empty or full. There's probably other facilities throughout the state, and Commissioner Stevens, you'd mentioned that juvenile crime is down, numbers are down, so there's room in existing facilities. And I assume it's extremely likely that a lot of these facilities would agree to proceed with an agreement where you're paying for usage. And so when that bed sits empty, you're not paying for that. There's other concerns as well that, as you're all aware, when we initially heard that you were considering this proposal back in early June, our Superior Court judges sent you a letter, and then that was followed up by a letter drafted by my juvenile court administrator, Phil Jans, in July, and then we heard back shortly after that you had moved on to other agenda items, and then I caught wind of this forum today. So I just wanted to extend the invitation that if you're interested in doing your due diligence, if it's strictly just about cost, and I think it's a much bigger issue than that, but if it's strictly about cost, I think you can do better. And reach out. We would certainly be willing to talk about those things. Thank you.
Hi, Joe Harris, the Chief of Police in Ottawa. I want to first commend you guys for looking at these other options. I understand you haven't made a decision yet, and I appreciate that. A couple of things I wanted to touch on was efficiency, whether or not outsourcing our criminal justice system to a private enterprise is the most efficient way to do it. I think everybody's brought up a lot of concerns here, and I echo a lot of those concerns. The control piece, losing that accountability over these inmates that are basically under our purview, under our control, and I understand defense counsel's concerns, and I echo those as well. I remember when Grant County was subject to some issues with providing effective defense, and I think that's something that we need to also think about. The potential impact on law enforcement, and I'll use Mattawa as an example, we're the furthest south city in the county. For us to make a round trip to Ephrata to drop off a juvenile or to somebody at the jail is about an hour and 45 minutes, almost 2 hours. And that's 2 hours that I have to go back and justify to my city why there's no police services in our city. And I don't know what it's going to look like with this transportation situation, but if there's the potential that it's going to cost one of my officers potentially a 5-hour round trip, that then I can't provide services to my city, that's an issue. And that's something that I hope is being addressed as well. And then looking at it more locally, I would urge the commission to look at our current setup, and if we talked about doing some sort of needs assessment or some sort of outside evaluation to use the resources we currently have and make them more effective. I'm a firm believer in keeping our tax dollars local rather than shipping that out to other counties. One thing that, going back to Mattawa, that we see there, just because we're so far away from the rest of the services in the county, we feel these issues that people are talking about, we feel those every day. It is extremely difficult for us to get services from Grant Integrated Services, from New Hope, from juvenile probation, from any public service out there. Because we're so far away, it's really difficult for us to partake in those services. And I would hate to see the county, as a county, step into that same position that we're now trying to rectify. Thank you.
Chief, if I could, I think we've covered it, and on the transportation concerns, the transportation is included in the daily bed rate for Martin Hall. Your officers, I can't guarantee never, because you can't guarantee anything, but
right.
The plan does not change. You would bring them to Ephrata like you do now, and they would be transported by Martin Hall.
Okay, I wasn't aware of what those details look like, that's why I brought it up. But that would be something that I would want to see, of course, before.
And that's what the other counties do.
Right.
There's nothing we can do about your 3-hour back and forth from Mattawa.
I think there is. I think there is.
Any other comments?
My name's Mary Knowles, and I volunteer, so the community's involved too.
Could you speak up just a little bit?
I'll try.
Thank you.
The volunteers that go up there too for drug counseling and other services and stuff. So the community's involved. So I don't want to drive this Spokane. And I don't think that, what I've heard, that Martin Hall wasn't very good in my community, so that vicious warehouse. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Sheriff Jones. I wasn't going to speak today, but I am going to. What the bottom line is that this comes down to one aspect of juvenile, which is detention. And I'm only going to speak on behalf of the Grant County Sheriff's Office. I won't speak for other law enforcement agencies that are here or around this county. But I will tell you, I've been in this business now 25 years. And there's one thing constant about the detention facility at Grant County Juvenile to law enforcement. It's frustrating. And I will just say that as blunt as I can. They've had restrictions, whether it's only people that can be arrested and booked is felonies or DVs. We have kids that need to be placed in a safe environment, whether if they're committing a crime in the streets, and to where that process can start. Whether that process starts here with probation and mental health and all that, once they are in custody, that's a whole nother subject. My concern is as law enforcement, and I get it every single day, about we can't book juvenile, we don't even call it juvenile, because we can't get anybody intaked in a juvenile. When you have over 20 detention monitors for 7.5 beds, and I have 40 corrections officers for a 200-bed facility, the math just doesn't work for me. So what I would like to see, if you decide to remain here, that I believe that some changes need to be made to the detention portion of juvenile. So that's my piece.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I know there's been, go ahead, I'll make my comment after you.
Richard Cole, Grant County citizen. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. So is a concern, I heard Sheriff Jones talk about maybe juvenile administration or legal issues. Is a concern cost, legal issues? What's a concern for the commissioners?
I think we, and I've been asked this question previously, what is the driving force, not driving forces, but singular force behind our decision? We've made no decision, first of all, I think we've stated that plenty. There's no driving force. There are discussions. It's not just monetary. There's a lot of other issues that go there too. Exposure to liability, budget concerns, ongoing costs of programs. There's a lot of different things to take a look at. And I think when you look at an efficiency model, those are the things that you should look at. Not just one driving force of money. It's not just about money.
Sounds good. I would say, 20 years ago, you used to have 40 youth in that facility. Went down to 20, went down to 15, down to 10. It's a ghost town in the detention facility. There's no kids in the facility. I've seen 3 kids in there. So I just want the commissioners to be good stewards of our tax-paying dollars. I'm not saying to close it, to open it, but there's not a lot of youth in there.
That's actually what we're trying to do, Mr. Cole, is look at the efficiencies and see what that warrants.
I'm John Melvin with the Sheriff's Department. I work down at the Walook School as a school resource officer down there. I'd like to share just some observations of what we're seeing somewhat with the youth. I'm not representing this as the department's position at all, but some of my personal observations. We have a number of young people with drug issues or criminal issues that are on probation. We've experienced significant problems and delays with holding those students accountable to their conditions. And I'm not trying to point fingers at juvenile or at the courts, but when we have students that we know have failed their urine analysis drug tests for months on end before there's steps taken to hold them accountable, it becomes very difficult for the school system trying to do interventions. If we can't have some teeth to the probation components of if they don't comply with those conditions, then there's going to be consequences. So I guess a factor in your decisions is if those elements for probation can be tightened up to be more effective, to be more supportive of what we need to be doing with the kids, then you may look at larger numbers than you're seeing today.
So
Well,
I guess,
think that goes to, sorry, I think that goes to what the sheriff said about couldn't get certain individuals in, so, yeah.
now I believe youth services, now if there's a warrant for the juvenile, they can go in if it's a probation violation. I believe this was just a recent, I'm looking at Garth, maybe no?
I can share what was shared through our administration down to us.
Okay.
Was if a juvenile is under active supervision from juvenile and officers have them violating misdemeanors or gross misdemeanors, upon confirmation that they're on active supervision with juvenile, those people can now be booked. And that's a very welcome addition.
And I believe it's a recent one.
Yes, within like the last month.
We do it, we've done it for years, but just on case-by-case basis.
As far as it being put out to the line officers, you know, we just got it a month ago saying, and I will say that we have had the ability to go through a supervisor if we've got a kid that's just totally out of control. It's not a felony, but something where there was a real need, real gang associations, that juvenile has been willing to talk with our supervisors about special circumstances.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments?
I'd like to just say one thing. I don't know if anybody's read the recent Night Fiber article, which some of the Grant County Youth Services staff were interviewed. There's been several comments today addressing out-of-area location for our juveniles, taking our juveniles out of our community, out of our community that they have access to community services, away from legal counsel, et cetera, et cetera. One of the comments made by staff at the Grant County Youth Services to High Fiber News, and I'll quote, "If commissioners are dead setting on shutting us down, send them to a different facility, because then you know they're going to be met with a certain level of care. Adding the Chelan and Benton Franklin juvenile facilities would be a better fit in terms of location and services and operate according to state standards." That statement kind of contradicts some of the things that I've heard today. I just think that needed to be said. The gentleman, I forget your name, from Chelan Youth Services, stated that the Chelan facility was 50 miles away and the Medical Lake was 115 miles away. I don't know the exact mileage. Those are semantics. But the Benton Franklin juvenile facilities, regardless of whether they're Chelan, whether they're Benton Franklin, whether they're Martin Hall, all of those are not in Grant County. So the concerns about keeping these facilities or these services local is kind of been contradicted by staff at our youth services. So these are the things we have to take. I mean, are we really discussing the same thing, or is this, do we not want them to go to Martin Hall if that's the decision that was made? So Mr. Kopit, I believe, is going to address his comment.
Yes, Garth Kopit, Detention Manager, Grant County Juvenile. We have evidence-based programming that is provided at our facility and through our treatment counselors that is not done at Martin Hall. That's something that would be missed. And so as far as services in that arena, would be a cost reduction to our department. Children are not efficient. And any of us that have had children or work with children, they're not efficient. And so as adults, though, we need to be in the care and making sure that we're taking care of the one and making sure that one is important and knows that they're important, and because that one can change the world. And I see that sending our youth elsewhere is not doing that. And so I appreciate others that have, everyone that's showed up today. There's others here that can't speak, other detention managers and that can't speak, and other from departments that can't speak, but I appreciate their attendance as well and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Tammy Roloff. I work at Grant County Juvenile as a treatment counselor, but I know that we talk about the services that we provide, which I know what services we provided. We work really hard to try to reshape the minds of our youth, but one thing that has been detrimental for a lot of our kids in continuing those services from detention to the community is the fact that if they are receiving park if they are receiving mental health, we have that ability to transport them to continue that already established relationship with their counselors. And I realize that Martin Hall has some services. I'm not gonna have personality. They have the ability to provide those services, but not in an effective way, because if those services are broke and they get housed at Martin Hall, when they come back, it's already, their case has been closed, they have to restart that, and most of the time, without help in initiating it doesn't happen. And that's why I think it's not just about providing those services, it's about continuing that and allowing the youth to keep those relationships up without breaking whatever strides counselors already make with those youth. I think that's important. And I don't think that by moving them over there and bringing them back that they would continue. So that's what I think is important about reshaping the behaviors to try and not get that continued behavior. And I don't think that would happen if they were taken out of our community.
Any other comments?
I got a question for either Garth or Warren. I know you've been there, you have to come to the microphone. What is the recidivism rate at Grant County Youth Services?
Actually, I don't have a firm figure on that.
Can you guess?
Okay.
Well, we won't quote you as being an
Okay.
accurate number.
I think the only real record I can give you, okay, is that
Oh, I don't know if Warren can kind
I-
of, we might be able to bring the mic in, like, he broke free.
Warren Swanson, Administrator for Juvenile Court, Grant County. In terms of recidivism, it's a pretty difficult thing to kind of get your hand on, but that is what juvenile courts are totally focused on and have been over the last several decades. And I think I mentioned to the board here, but we used to receive 600 to 700 referrals to the court. And this year we'll be lucky, and lucky is an odd term here, but it's unlikely that we will have 200 referrals to the court. And it's a very significant decrease. And listening to the sheriff's comments about what kids we do take or don't take, whatever that has been, it's working. Okay? It may not feel comfortable to the officer at the moment that what situation they're dealing with or to the family, but everything we've been involved in is a part of what's been happening in terms of a decreased amount of crime in our community. We participate in an evidence-based intervention system that starts from the beginning of sentencing and outlines the type of services that a child should be eligible for, and then we make our efforts to get them into those. The group of kids that really don't need our intervention, we provide very little services other than oversight to the court order. And I believe Grant County, we're in good standing with the state of Washington that oversees our intervention programs. We have one of the highest rates of completion in our ART program, which is our aggression replacement training system. And part of that encompasses everybody that makes that work, all the way from detention staff to probation staff, to treatment staff. And is that I don't have on an individual basis figures for you as to recidivism, but it's something that is really reducing statewide. And as Richard mentioned, it's not just a county-wide issue or statewide issue, it's a nation issue. So this is a good issue, I mean, this is a good problem to have, okay? Well, it's unsettling to have these conversations and to look critically at what our services should be, can be, and the cost for them. The fact of the matter is that this is a positive thing for our community. Okay? If there are means and ways that we need to look at operating differently, and the availability of bed space to deal with minor charges, should be aware that minor charges are usually out the very next day. Okay? But oftentimes that begins this intervention process. And it's also an issue in terms of any kids that we take into detention, that the prosecutor's office has to get involved at that point, charging decisions, issues about trial, countdowns, stuff, outside dates. And juvenile court is a very quick justice system compared to the adult system here, and that we have very quick dates that we have to meet to complete cases, particularly for kids that are confined. So it was kind of a long, evolved response here. I'm sure I'm close to whatever 3 minutes here is.
I have a quick question too on the ART program. How many, because it does look like a neat program that you put on, how many kids do you, I don't know if it's 1 year, 2 year, 6 months, how many
We
kids?
attempt to operate 3 courses a year.
Okay.
It is a 10-week program, 3 days a week, that we operate centrally out of Moses Lake, since that's the majority of kids that we have. But we do transport kids from the greater Quincy, Warden, Ephrata area to those programs. And should a kid be in detention that are involved in those programs, and we currently have a situation like that, we do get those kids back to that program during the day, provide supervision of that child, and bring them back to detention.
So how many like graduates would you have in a year, do you think?
We graduate anywhere from probably 6 to 8 in terms of each class.
Okay.
Warren, you say that you get them into these programs. Does that come after detention or after court? Is that the programs you're talking about got
Yes.
anything to do with the detention?
Well, while they're in detention, they're involved in the services that we do provide to them there, pre-adjudication.
The ones you especially talked about were the ones after.
Yes, these are kids that have been adjudicated, that we have done an evaluative process. That again is an evidence-based review process that determines what programs they should or should not be in.
Okay, thank you.
Warren, while you're up there,
Sure.
fast. I'd like you, if you could, address the Sheriff's Department concerns about in the past, they've only been able to bring felony and DV offenders to the juvenile facility. And up until just recently, they were informed by your staff that they can now bring juvenile offenders for misdemeanor and gross misdemeanors that are under active supervision by probation officers. Why would your facility not accept those offenders for gross misdemeanors and misdemeanors previously, when we have a 19-bed facility and only an average census of 7.2?
Well, the census has been going down over the last number of years. Okay. We just over the last couple of years have gotten below 10 to 14 average of kids in the facility here. It may be something of a legacy system. I have the experience of working in detention 25 years ago there, when numbers were initially low when I first started working there, and then got up into the 20s and 30s. And we had no bed space. We had kids double bunked, kids out in the hallway or the dining area, and and I believe that, at least with my training, with our past administrators and with the prosecutor's office, that they did not feel that these minor offenses were confinable offenses. So I
So
believe
this is the
that-
prosecutor's office decision?
I'm not trying to like throw them under the bus.
No, I'm trying to understand.
I'm just saying it does end up involving the prosecutor's office in terms of them immediately having to respond to this case.
Right.
Okay.
Just-
A case that might actually just go to diversion. The child has no criminal history and would have no need to be detained. Other than the fact that it's the immediacy of the issue to law enforcement that's trying to deal with that child and their family or whatever the situation may be.
I don't know what the intake process is up in juvenile, but by the numbers you provided us, in 2015, the average number of juvenile throughout the year was 15. You have a 19-bed facility, and I'm just putting a scenario out there to you. If the Sheriff's Department shows up with a juvenile for a gross misdemeanor or a misdemeanor, and you have 15 inmates there, and you have 4 beds available, why in 2015 would they have been turned away? If they-
Again, that was essentially our training, if you will, in philosophical point of view, that the part of the problems with detention, okay, is while it's not the answer for everything, it doesn't help everything, and in fact, at times, it creates a bigger problem, okay? Exposing kids to other kids in detention increases the chance of them reoffending, okay? We do know that on a statistical basis, not just Washington State, but statewide, well documented. And if you can alleviate that contact, particularly for our first time kind of offenders, minor level offenders, that's actually a positive, okay? And it's not a negative thing about what law enforcement wants to do, okay, or what we're putting up barriers to. It's just that there are consequences unintended by placing kids in detention. And if you can be a factor in limiting those unintended consequences, that is a good thing.
Another question for you, again, I'm not real familiar with the juvenile detention facility. And maybe you don't have an actual answer for this, but you talked about the potential negative impacts on a youth when they're brought to the detention facility and exposed to youth that are already detained there because they've only been cited on a misdemeanor or a gross misdemeanor. What would you think the negative impact is, or societal impact, on that youth that are released to the custody of their parents? And if these kids are already come from a broken home or have no parents, you release them after you cite them to their parents, and now they're right back out in society and possibly more apt to reoffend immediately because now they're out there and they have not been exposed to the harshness of the detention facility. And that might be apples to oranges, I don't know, but you think there'd almost be a similar reoffense rate amongst those kids that are immediately put right back out on the street? I mean,
And I can't say that that example wouldn't happen, okay? But the child is cited, okay? Paperwork does get done by law enforcement. It does move through the system, okay? It gets reviewed by the juvenile court, gets reviewed by the prosecutor's office, and this legal decisions have been made as to what's going to transpire with that child. It's just that there isn't the immediacy of arrest there. And actually, statewide, nationwide, all efforts in regards to juvenile justice are really focused on confinement and lessening that as an option here. So this is not an issue that's going to go away, okay? The real focus is on trying to keep kids out of detention. I believe the commissioner would reiterate that.
I've always said at Martin Hall, the best thing we could have is no kids. I mean, that is, I mean, that's what you want. I mean, but the reality is, it just doesn't. But as that's come down with a lot of the counties, that economies of scale have now kicked in, much like when you're, I mean, you have to staff that facility. I don't have to tell you. You have to staff it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is over 168 hours. It's there. So you're feeding them 3 meals a day. You do all the different things you do with them. So whether you have 5 or you have 15, it takes the same amount of people to do that. And that's, so when it gets down to those numbers, it gets tough.
And I appreciate the questions. They're definitely make you think through these things.
Speaking for myself, I've learned a lot today, just hearing and I appreciate the concerns. That's what we're here for today, is to hear what the community, the staff input is. We appreciate that. We need that to make a decision one way or the other. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Any other comments?
There will be more questions for you, I'm sure.
I do, but I'll get out, so that's
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We actually need, it's recorded, so we need, if you can make your way out while she's coming to the mic. I just want to thank everybody for coming, because it's really hard to represent people when you're not quite sure what their thoughts are. You know, we've kind of, hear little things here and there, so we thought, well, let's just kind of open this up and take some public comment on this. And so we do appreciate that, because it really is, and we have a lot more questions to answer, so.
I'm Jolene Kellums. I'm a probation counselor with juvenile. And I just have a question and then a comment. As far as transportation, I think building off what Chief Harris said, when the youths are brought to our facility, is it going to be law enforcement that sits with the kids or juvenile staff that sit with the kids until Martin Hall can get there to do the transport?
Who sits with them now?
Detention.
I don't think we envisioned it that it would be a law enforcement, that if, like Mattawa, it takes them
Right.
2 hours,
Right.
we're not gonna make them sit there.
Right.
It would be somebody that is qualified, that has the training to, probably a detention manager to sit there. You know,
Okay.
we don't know if we're gonna have, 5 people on staff, we're gonna have a
Right.
couple. So we don't know what that's gonna look like. That's,
Okay.
we're just starting.
But it's not gonna be law enforcement's obligation
Correct.
to sit there? Okay, that answers.
Law enforcement has an entirely different role.
Right, right. That's, I didn't, I just
Unless
wanted that
the sheriff
clarified for
volunteers to do it
myself.
himself.
No, and I didn't think it should be their obligation. That's not.
The Chief Creeper volunteer.
Yeah. And then the other comment I just have, going off of Sheriff Jones. Me as a probation officer, that's the only person I can speak for, has heard this frustration from law enforcement for a very long time. I've been doing probation for 14 years, and while I can't give them any answers, one thing that has popped up, and I never know where it stops, but law enforcement does not have access to our state system and our information, and we don't have access to law enforcement's information. And so if they have a kid, the only way they can find out if they're on probation is to stop what they're doing, call detention, have detention look it up, and get the information that way. And that's if the officer even has time to call. So my comment would be, it would be very helpful for both sides if we were allowed access to each other's systems. So we could communicate that way, and we can build information, and they would know who's on probation and what their rules are. Because I think the assumption from the general public is Johnny got caught at the store last night stealing, whatever, and the next day we automatically know about it. And we don't. And so I know that that's a frustration with everybody. So that's my comment, I guess, on that. Thanks.
Okay, we are out of time, so I'm assuming we're kind of gonna wind this down unless anybody has a comment there.
Madam Chair, I would suggest we leave public comment open and just go ahead and close.
Okay. And again, we really appreciate all of you coming here today, taking time out of your busy day to come here. And we have a room full of people. I'm sorry that some of you have had to stand. This means that it's a hot topic, and we need to spend a lot more time looking into it. So thank you.
Thank you.
So there, Richard made a motion to leave the public comment portion open.
Second.
But just to close this meeting, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting has been closed. Thank you.
Thank you.